Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I'm going to chat with you guys a little bit in defense of, not just defense of, but just the common sense elements of why, if we want to be really strong, we need to do 1 rep max lifts. And I want people to understand why 2 rep, 3 rep, 5 rep maxes, these things cannot replicate the same thing. They cannot replicate the same intramuscular coordination benefits that we get from max lifts. And when I say that max lifts carry over, I do mean that. In other words, doing technique work with 80% versus doing maxes with a variation of an exercise doesn't carry over as well. What do we mean? You come in and perform a back squat all that you want. Now you can perform back squats at 80% all day long. But a box squat taken to a max, or even a box squat against chains, a box squat against bands, will have more carryover in terms of intramuscular coordination to your back squat than back squatting at 80% will. Why? Because the technique's not the same. The mindset isn't the same. The intramuscular coordination isn't the same. You only learn how to move maximum weights by moving maximum weights. And practicing technique on a movement you're already proficient on doesn't do anything. This is where people get Olympic lifting or weightlifting mixed up with low skill lifts. And I want to make this very, very clear. The squat, bench, deadlift, good morning, and overhead press are low skill exercises. Okay. In other words, what do we mean low skill exercises? There are people who can hit elite numbers on them who don't practice them. There are guys out there who hit elite numbers and then say later, oh yeah, I got to this strength level without really figuring out how to do the lift. Because they got brutally strong. I'm not saying technique doesn't matter, but here's what we mean by the technique matters. If you figure out how to brace your core and where to set the bar and your head position and chest position and everything else on any type of squat, it will carry over to any other type of squat. There's a lot to be said for head position. And ironically, it's popular to use the worst possible head position. This is the one negative thing starting strength did, by the way. Worst thing they ever did was teaching people to look down on a squat. Most asinine thing I've ever seen. That will actually hurt your long-term potential to have an amazing max squat more than any other technical cue I've ever seen. Because the other stuff they get good. They teach you to use the hips to squat. All right, that's actually great. We need more of that. The head down thing. Get your head up. Get your chin up and your chest up. But once you learn those things, doesn't matter. In other words, once you've learned how to use your hips to squat, learn how to hinge, you learn how to push your hips back, you learn how to drive up and externally rotate your hips on a squat, you learn where to place a bar, you learn where to put your chin. What else is there? Do you really think any other technique that you do is going to add 30 or 40 pounds to your squat after that? I promise you it won't. The only thing that's going to add weight to your squat after that's getting stronger. Adding muscle mass. Now, how do we get stronger? Well, obviously muscle mass is the first thing. Number two, what else? Intramuscular coordination. How do we develop the intramuscular coordination to lift heavy? By lifting heavy. And the load is completely different. Your technique at 80% is not going to look like a 1 rep max. Now, people say, well, I lift heavy and it looks the same. No, you didn't lift a 1 rep max. Your bar path will not be the same. 75, 80, 85, 90%, you can probably maintain identical form. When you start going up above 90% and ramping above it, that's when you're going to see the bar path changed. So you're going to see your technique change. And the things that you learn by lifting really, really heavy carry over to other movements. And the way that your body moves, the coordination that you learn, carries over. And it really works that way. It really does work that way. What else? Well, we learn how to ramp up and hit a big lift. Because let's come over to the other point. What if you're having an off day? Why are you having an off day? Besides tiredness and fatigue, because you're not having proper fatigue management, usually we have an off day because we feel stiff or sluggish or our body feels different. Inflammation in our body, water retention in our body, our GI tract, we ate different foods, right? All that stuff that makes you have an off day, that puts you out of the groove that you learned, can happen at any time. And I promise you it'll happen at a meet, it'll happen in competitions, it'll happen in all sorts of places. You're not going to be 100% consistent in every aspect of your life. Okay? So learning to max out itself teaches you how to ramp up in an inconsistent environment. It teaches you how to find your groove. And that's why we can change lifts all the time. And I think people also need to understand that if you max on the same lift every week, and this is what the West Side guys found, what Louis Simmons found, all the conjugate guys found, if you try to max on the same lift every week, you actually regress. You actually regress. When we rotate lifts, we don't regress. Okay, so when people say, well, we could just do the classic lifts instead, well, not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily work that way. You're not going to get the same benefits the way that you think you will. You're actually better rotating them. In other words, let's come back to that other point. We would all do it that way if it worked. Right? That's what we would do. Like, why would we bother to need any variations or have chains or bands or different? Why bother? If we could just do the other and it actually worked. But the beauty of it is that intramuscular coordination carries over. Okay? The technique that you learn when doing a dead pin bench an inch off your chest, the bar paths that you find and the coordination that you learn will carry over to your bench press. When you bench press against bands, or you bench press against chains, you're still learning how to set up and to push through on the bench press. It'll carry over just fine. Technique is pretty much the same. There can be some differences. But we have to learn to coordinate the muscle that we have. Right? Because we know that your size and strength within the individual are enormously correlated. They're like 85 to 90% correlated for you as a person. Now, notice I didn't say 100%. 85, 90% correlated for you. Your exact muscle gain versus strength may not be the same as your workout buddy. His is going to be that way in his body. He's going to have a certain overlap. But he might not, at the exact weight and size, be the exact same strength as you at the same weight and size. There's going to be some differences, right? But you can't change those differences in yourself. You can only change those differences to a different human being with a different structure and insertions and leverages and everything. Okay? So changes in that regard of size versus strength are only different for comparing different people. You can't change them in your body. They are what they are. Okay, so hopefully people understand that. I'm not saying we can't look at someone and tell how strong they are, because we can look at someone's leverages sometimes in height and limb lengths and tell how much more muscle they need to gain or lose to have a certain amount of strength. Right? We can do that because we can look at a lot of those things. But over to the point, we have to actualize that potential. And it's arguable that certain muscle fibers only get properly fatigued and stimulated with maximum weights. But if we don't practice maximum weights, we are leaving gains off the table, but we're leaving force production gains off the table potentially. We know we need it for the coordination. But there is some data that would suggest that we also need it to actually make the most gains in hypertrophy in the muscle fibers that are going to contribute the most to the highest thresholds of output. So we need to max out, and we need to do it often. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.